Emancipation is long overdue, so it becomes procrastination, cause freedom is within you. For some reason we think we're free, so we'll never be, because we haven't recognized slavery. You still a slave, look at how you behave, debating on where and when and how and what master gave.
Hello everyone, and welcome to This Week in Tyranny, the most hardcore news show on earth. My name is Conrad Rogas, and I am your host. I'd like to remind you that if tyranny is not at your doorstep, that's because there's someone in the street keeping it at bay. And independent journalism is what it's all about here. This is episode 22. Today is Saturday, May 6th. Happy Cinco de Mayo. The full moon is out here. Appropriately. More appropriately, the sun is setting on our liberty and care. Two things that always follow the same path, the sun and the moon. Just like the sun and the moon, liberty and care always follow the same path. So I'd like to welcome some of my new viewers. Welcome. And I'm very grateful for your time and care. And to those that don't know me personally, I'm a Polish guy from Chicago. What I do on the internet is similar to what I do in my daily life. I'm a contractor by profession, so I come in, destroy what needs to be destroyed, fix or build what needs to be built. Then I take out the garbage, I clean up, make it look, nice. And This Week in Tyranny is all about getting my hands dirty, touching the dangerous and unpleasant parts of our reality, and that's what I do. So just as a quick restatement of what this show's purpose is, why I started it, I talk about all the predominant narratives and events in the world, particularly the United States, all of the most controversial topics, all of the worst stuff, the most hot button issues and topics. I report on that and then analyze the dynamics from a natural law and objective truth perspective. Okay, so that's my channel and website is called Truth and Law. And just to quickly outline the purpose of my work and my life mission, essentially. So first, freedom for all people of Earth. And actually, when it comes down to it, all beings, including animals. But AKA, it's the abolition of slavery. I'm a modern day abolitionist. I believe in abolishing all slavery, including government. Then second, stopping abuse and violence against children. This has really come to the forefront as the main thing that I fight against here, to stop abuse and violence, and it'll come up in this episode especially. And then last but not least, helping in recovery from addiction and mental illness, both individual and on a mass scale, because there's a lot of mass scale addiction. This is something that's personal in my life, my recovery from addiction and mental illness. In other words, physical, emotional, and spiritual liberty, but also physical, emotional, and spiritual care. I mentioned care and liberty all comes together. But let's go right into the loss of liberty this week in tyranny. So Florida lawmakers passed a series of bills regarding transgender individuals. Okay, controversial issue, I know, but I'm going to break it down into objective right and wrong based on natural law. That can be done. I'm going to do it. And then whatever remains, that's a gray area or, subjective or nuanced, then I'll at least give my personal take on it. But on Wednesday, the State House in Florida passed a bill that makes it illegal for a person to go into the bathroom that doesn't correspond with their biological sex. So this is called the Safety in Private Spaces Act. Now, representatives are claiming that it only basically restates universal common decency standards, which aren't actually objective, right? They are common decency standards. It is common decency, so is opening a door for someone and giving up your seat to an old person in public transportation. But the thing about decency is voluntary and self-directed by the people. If you legislate decency, then it's no longer decency, it's obedience, okay? And a law, by the way, is a statement or equation that describes a principle that is objective and scientifically verifiable. So after Ron DeSantis signs this, it'll be called a law, but it's not actually a law, it's a decree, okay? It's an arbitrary dictate. And since you can receive a misdemeanor trespassing offense for violating this decree, you would have to pay the government, or if you don't, then they will deprive you of your freedom and take you to jail, and that's tyranny. And it's actually ironic that it's called the Safety in Private Spaces Act, because during the pandemic it was all about freedom over safety for people in Florida, for the Republicans in Florida, for all of us conservatives and right-wingers, right? But now there's no more freedom in private. There's no Freedom in Private Spaces Act. Now it's safety. I thought we weren't going to trade freedom for safety. I know I won't, and jokingly saying us conservatives and right-wingers, because as the older viewers should know, I am not. So really, the only law that has any place in bathrooms is you can't violate anybody else's rights while you're in there. That's it. You can't touch them, you can't harass them, or disturb their peace. But I know the counter argument is, if a fully grown man with a beard starts hanging out in the women's restroom, then that is violating their right to peace and personal privacy in a public space. I understand that. In my personal view, bathrooms should be private. Like gender neutral bathrooms are a good solution whenever it's possible. It's just, you don't have to worry about signs and where you're supposed to go, you're not supposed to go. It's just a bathroom. It's just, you go in there, you use the bathroom, and you're gone. You move on with your life, okay? And when there is space for it, there should be fully closed stalls. I don't understand why I should be having to walk in the bathroom and see somebody's shoes with their pants around their ankles. Is this really necessary? I don't need to be looking at your shoes. And just to drive this home, I work construction, so it would be super easy to do this. All you need to do is just trace the lines of the stall. You just draw a little line, then you just unscrew the stalls from the wall. It's pretty easy. They're just screwed into the wall, they're screwed into the floor. Take them out, screw in 2x4 on the ceiling, 2x4 on the wall. Put just 2x4s like this, studs, to make an opening for the doors. Call the drywall guys. They come in, they do it, put drywall in 2 hours, and you just screw the door on, and everybody has their own personal stall where you don't have to worry. You're inside, you have your privacy, and then everybody could use the bathroom, and it's not a place to hang out. Everybody just does their business and moves on. Okay, that would be a logical, sensible solution to that issue. And at the end of the day, if they're not harming anybody or violating their rights, you can't really tell somebody what bathroom to use. That's the reality of it. And if anyone isn't comfortable with that, then they just have to get over it. This is 2023. This is real life. We have bigger issues, right? But if you want to address the issue of moral degradation, like erosion of social etiquette and decay of common decency, we should start with government, right? The idea of punishment and coercion being the only way to get people to do something good and achieve a common decency, maybe there would be more decency if these decrees and regulations didn't treat us like caged animals from the days of kindergarten, right? Now, I know that there are agendas out there. I know about the satanic orders wanting to push androgyny. I know about foreign interests wanting to destabilize the West. I know about the multinational bankers wanting to destroy the family unit, individualize them to make them more prone to consumer targeting, dissolve the union between the man and the woman, to lower birth rates. I know about that agenda. I know about the agenda to feminize men and soften males. I made a presentation about it, actually. It's called the Attack on Manhood. I should link to it, So I know what's going on out here, but that's not what this is, right? This tyrannical law. This is the government intruding into harmless personal decisions. That's what these are, harmless personal decisions. DeSantis and his little government is not going to do anything about this issue, nor do they want to. They don't want to solve this issue, because that would require getting to the causal factors and talking about objective truth and objective law. But they're not doing that. They're just capitalizing on the people of Florida being fed up of hearing about being diverse and being tolerant, because the people of Florida, they're sick and tired of their freedom being infringed on too, and the government is exploiting that and pointing the finger at trans people and immigrants and minorities, doing all this, and the majority buys it. They're just creating that friction to rule over all of us. The point is to rule over all of us, okay? For the government of Florida, leave these people alone, okay? Government is always trying to get in your bathroom and get in your bedroom, okay? Rulers are always trying to get into your most private areas. They want to invade your most primal and animalistic privacy, right? These are the predators and the perverts. And I don't mean like Ron DeSantis and the Republican lawmakers, right? They're only capitalizing on a public sentiment in order to collect support for their careers, right? These politicians don't give a damn about trans people or regular people. They're just using them as like political and corporate slogans. I'm talking about a cult government, right? I'm talking about the various individuals who direct social engineering, the members of think tanks that discuss global policy. These are the real sexual deviants out here. They want you to be under their influence even in the bathroom. Yeah, this is total psychological violence. They want to dominate you completely. And that's why the focus is on areas where the people feel the most comfortable, which is what? The genitalia, the mother's womb, right? All the stuff about abortion. Because if they can traumatize you there, they could break you. And just like a rapist, their desire is to own and consume you completely. Okay? So if we're really getting into the serious tip of the top of the people calling the shots, that's what kind of people these are. But as far as this law, it reeks of the former oppressive church and the former oppressive church's obsession with women and sexual interactions. I talked about this last episode. And now the church is no longer powerful and no longer respected in general. People actually respect government institutions a lot more. That's why this latest wave of rigid biological determinism comes from the government and not the church. Invading the individual's deepest and most private, vulnerable aspects comes from the government now, which is one of the two most dominant religions, government and money. But my devout Christian friends, there's nothing to be sad about. Separate the dogma of the dying church from the true and living God and the teachings of Christ, and I will be here waiting. Okay? The church is here now. The new church is no longer in those buildings with those priests. The church now is with people who can go and read and interpret the word, can study, and they're the ones who are actually speaking and fighting for everything that Jesus Christ fought for. So I'll be here doing the work, carrying the cross. We have to carry our cross. Let me talk about the phrase common sense, because this is going around a lot more now. People saying this is just common sense. Men go in the men's room, women go in the women's room. That's common sense. And this is now being used as the new conventional wisdom. But it's really more of a new religion. Common sense sounds like it's similar to natural law. It's like it suggests, it implies that this is something that's inherently self-evident and existing. But when people are using this term common sense, it's becoming more of like a right-wing conservative slogan. And I've been saying this myself. I've been using the term common sense, and I realize I'm using it and other people are using it, but we're not. We're using it in completely different ways. When politicians talk about common sense now, they mean fundamentalism, right? They mean the old status quo. It means that's how we've always done it. And just as an aside, England just had a joke of a crowning ceremony, right? The group of clowns participating in that nonsense, crowning a big grown-up boy who never wiped his ass. They're putting a crown on him, and everybody just takes it so seriously. I bet to them it's common sense, day you're supposed to crown a king. It's common sense that you bow your head to him, and everybody, if the queen dies, everybody takes a day off, and somehow respecting this person, that's common sense to them. So that shows you what common sense is really worth, Let me just break down the definition of common sense, right? Common, or the word common means often found. It means of the majority. It means prevalent among the people. Common. The word sense, a sense is a feel. A sense is perception, right? Having a perception, receiving stimuli from the environment. That's to sense something. So I'll substitute the word feel, and it's like a common feel. And the word common sounds a lot like commune, which is the word communism, and that's basically what this talk about common sense does. What these conservative lawmakers are doing, they're giving me the communism feel. So instead of common sense, let's just call it the communism feel. Just get in tune with that, because that's what's going on here. You guys aren't standing up for freedom. You guys aren't passing these new laws. These are tyrannical laws. How are more laws going to create freedom, right? Unless, laws that are actually in tune with natural law are redundant because they're stating something that already exists. Yeah. So, but my message to right-wingers, watch yourselves, because you're turning into your opponents, right? That's what's happening here. But another bill that passed the state Senate on Wednesday restricts teachers, faculty, and students from using the pronouns of their choice in public schools. That bill declares that it must be the policy of schools that a person's sex is an immutable biological trait, and it is false to use a pronoun other than the sex on a person's birth certificate. Now, I said I would give my personal view on things. And when it's not a simple issue of objective rights, and the topic of children is that complex, nuanced area, right? For example, while everybody has the right to make a free will choice, say to walk outside during a tornado and die in the tornado, and nobody else would have can rightfully stop them from doing that, a parent can rightfully stop their children from doing something that's going to hurt them or kill them, right? Even using force to do that. And it wouldn't be the parent violating their rights, okay? And by the way, there is such a thing as children's rights. I know some people think that children don't have rights somehow. That's crazy. You're like insane if you think that. Children have rights, but a parent isn't violating their rights to stop children from doing something that's going to actually harm them, okay? And this is all, because children need to be nurtured and protected until their body and mind can grow into their free will, right? The reason I'm talking about this, I'm just setting up the topic of children, and I'm going to go back to discussing this bill about how they basically made it illegal to use different pronouns than what you were biologically assigned. But back to what I was saying, a newborn has the free will to know that they should not be slapped in the face, right? At any age, people know that they don't want to be harmed. Now, a toddler has developed the free will to communicate certain things, right, to their parents. They can say a few things. They could motion, they're not as helpless and defenseless as a newborn. Then as they get older, the list of things that they can freely do expands, right? Getting dressed by themselves, deciding what they want to eat, more complex things that they can actually think of that, and they could put their free will to that. And you can't really you shouldn't force them, force your free will on them, because this is something that is important to them. They have the right to have the free will to do certain things. Maybe, maybe not eat the whole refrigerator of candy, but certain things they can do and certain things they cannot. And then by the time they're teenagers, they're essentially making all the free will decisions of an adult, right? Where usually the more self-sufficient they are, the more that the parents allow them to do. Now, is an 8-year-old who isn't self-sufficient rightfully able to make an irreversible decision about their gender? Which is what, these laws are coming down to. Can an 8-year-old make that decision? I don't know. So, 22 episodes, and that's the first time I've said those words on this show. I don't actually know. I don't actually know where the line is drawn there, right? Because I know an adult has the right to body modification surgery, of course. And then I know a newborn does not. He can't make that decision. So somewhere, some kind of boundary exists, right? We just don't know where it is. The government says that boundary is 18 years old. That's bullshit. That's just a totally arbitrary number. That's a number chosen to maximize revenue and control people. Just to kind of put a quick band-aid and a quick fix on something that's not simple. That boundary anyway wouldn't be measurable by just age. What one 12-year-old can do can be totally different from what another 12-year-old can do. And that's material I'm still working and researching on. This is an area I'm exploring, but that's not something I could present to you today. I'm 27. I'm still learning a lot, and I'm not a parent, right? So, but this is something I'm working on called natural law rights of children. And since I mentioned this, I'll tell a story about. I saw a story about a girl, a biological male, right? A boy, born a boy, and this is a girl who just lives like a girl. She tells her story, right? And this is about, they were talking about being able to play on the team, all this, just kind of a day in the life, or a couple, their daily life. And if nobody told me, I would totally believe that this is a female, right? They're talking about she's going to go through puberty now as a boy, and they were talking about the options of like hormone blockers and all this. And honestly, how my personal take on that is, if you watch that story, this is an older story, like 15 years ago. You could tell it was an older one. I would say that 11-year-old girl basically has the right, I would say, that the claim that she makes about who she is, affirming her identity, what she wants to do, I say basically let her do it, even if she wanted to have surgery. And I have always been against body modification surgery in general. All kinds of cosmetic surgery, and specifically gender changing surgery, because I personally do not think that interfering in natural biological processes is a good solution to the problems of transgender individuals, right? But society does that all the time. We interfere in biological processes all the time. But what is the best solution and therapy for transgender individuals is studying the occult, the Hermetic traditions, and ancient mystery schools, and specifically deeply studying the masculine and feminine aspects of nature, right, of existence. Masculinity and femininity are universal principles present throughout the universe, right, existing in nature. Masculinity and femininity are not human constructs. Now, does that mean the Hermetic principle of gender always corresponds perfectly to biological sex? Obviously not, right? Obviously, this isn't a one-to-one translation. And this has increased in recent times for a variety of reasons that I won't even discuss in this episode. But it is what it is. It is what it is. People are born this way, and their spirit is differently, translating differently to their biological body, and that's just the way it is. And that in itself, that knowledge in itself would help a lot of people suffering from this, right? That would give trans people some acceptance, some empowerment, and a starting point from which they can build now and do some self-work, okay? Nobody has this approach, right? Everybody wants to either lecture them, totally accept whatever they say, or totally deny. Who's pointing them towards the occult to really question their identity and figure out what this whole thing is about? People don't know about this, right? Gender identity should be questioned. And on this journey out of ignorance and into knowledge, my personal journey of coming out of that, of coming out of fear into love, of aligning my will to the divine will, I questioned my entire identity. I questioned everything, and essentially experienced a series of deaths and transitions of all different aspects of my being. Like people talk about ego death. When you're an addict and you leave that behind, a part of you dies. This is natural transitions. You're supposed to, you really want to work on yourself. If you have some kind of issues with your identity, you have some kind of psychological issues, you got to do a hard journey. You got to do some hard work. And that's a good thing. That helped me find my true identity. But who's telling children that? Who's telling transgender people that? You tell me. I've never heard that. That's the way out. But bottom line, I wanted to say I'm sensitive to the fact that I'm not a parent. I'm 27 years old. I am not a parent. There are things I do not know about parenting. And that's why the experience of having a child, raising a child, bringing a life into this world is so profound, because of the incredible sacrifice, protecting the innocence of a child and helping them to cultivate their free will and grow up as unscathed as possible. When it comes down to it, the parent really knows their child the best and needs to help their child to explore, find, and self-define their identity. Which is actually frightening to think about how many bad parents there are, how much parents are hurting their children. This is like a real sobering topic for me. It's become kind of one of the focal points of many of these episodes. It's not something I like talking about. I hope this channel doesn't go in this direction, but it's one of the main goals. So I have to go in this direction. This is one of those dirty jobs, right? Getting my hands dirty. We have to talk about children. We can't just sweep it under the carpet, because these problems are getting swept under the carpet and now they're coming up. And now people don't know what to do. But this brings us to the law about gender pronouns, okay? Is that law that, I'll repeat, the law is teachers in schools, basically it's making it illegal for them to call somebody a different pronoun than their biological birth certificate says. Now, is that tyrannical? Objectively, yes, it's tyrannical. And here's why. The government cannot legislate to anybody how to define themselves. Man, woman, or child. It doesn't matter what nature determines somebody to be. To the government, you are not nature, and you are not God, right? This reeks of just straight up royal elite arrogance, okay? King Charles comes to mind. You won't force me to define myself based on what you have on a piece of paper. I don't care, because you don't own me. You don't own these people. The owner of property decides the property's name. And I know this isn't about me. It's not about adults. It's about children. But guess what? Children are not property of their parents either. Children own themselves too, right? Parents are caretakers of the child's property until the rightful owner, being the grown-up child, returns to claim it. So when they grow up, that is like the owner returning from their journey of childhood into adulthood to claim their property back. Parents are taking care of the child's own property. Okay? There's a profound lifelong act of love, okay, and sacrifice. That's a big occult truth right there. Children own themselves, okay? So the government doesn't have the naming rights to a child. Right? That doesn't exist. The parents don't even name the child. Who names the child? The parents only assign a name to a child, and over time, the child can accept or reject that name. So every person names themselves, okay? Because only the person owns themselves. Okay, that is objective individual rights. So the government cannot require any kind of naming convention or pronoun conventions. Fundamentally, government does not actually even exist, because since people aren't property, individuals can be owned only by themselves. They're self-owning. And government then is just a group of individuals who are usurping individual property rights. That's it. That's it. We don't have to do any more episodes of This Week in Tyranny. That's what it comes down to. There are only individuals in this world, and those individuals are either violating rights or they are not. That's it. Now, a person or a private business can require his employees to refer to people by any arbitrary pronouns or names, right? Anybody can do that. If you have a business, you could do that. But we're talking about public schools here, right? Schools funded by money that we are forced to pay, aka money extorted from us. I'm talking about taxes, money extorted from the people. But even say we save the battle for another day, right? We live to fight another time. We say government stays, taxes stay, and we keep public schools. They better pull back these bullshit little decrees about pronouns, you know? This is just silly, clownish, and just basically don't piss me off, you know? Don't piss me off about pronouns and little shit, you know? Our money is being devalued. The world is totally slipping into totalitarianism and slavery, and you want to do basically little word arguments about semantics and pronouns. If a kid wants to be called shower handle in school, then call the kid shower handle. Fuck it, you know? Maybe then he will actually want to go to school and see that the teacher is a human being that actually treats him like a human being. Maybe he'll want to learn something from the teacher, and viewing the teacher as a person just like him and not a cop, not a police officer that's just gonna nag him and tell him things, preach to him, right? And I also have to touch on the biological determinism angle here. This bill declares that it must be the policy of all schools that a person's sex is an immutable biological trait, and that it is false to use a pronoun other than sex on a person's birth certificate. So what I'm talking about is nature really the final judge, jury, and executioner of our identity? Is nature deciding everything? And what I'm going to talk about is the double slit experiment, basically. Basically, there are two doors when it comes to genders. Apparently, this is what we think. There are two doors, and a person can walk through one door or walk through the other door. When you're born, you've walked through one of those two doors. Either you are a male with male genitalia or a female with female chromosomes and female genitalia, right? And of course, that's true. That's factual. But the double slit experiment is actually an experiment that happened. The original was done 200 years ago. Okay, 200 years ago they did this, and the modern version is at least 100 years old. Basically, what they did is they launched a particle. Scientists, they launched a particle through two openings, a light particle, to see what kind of a pattern it would make. And they saw that it made an interference pattern, which means that particle, that light particle, acted like a wave. Okay, so they wanted to see how that is. Then they measured it, and they saw that they wanted to determine which one of those two doors it was going into. Right, so this is like what I'm talking about with gender. Are they male or are they female? And basically what they did is they set up a measuring device and this and that. Really, that's beside the point. This proved that there's a wave-particle duality to particles, and they do this with bigger particles, and it seems like they're supposed to go through one door or the other, but really they're acting like waves, so it seems like they're going through both the doors, they're going through neither door, but then when you measure it, it's always going to go in the other door, right? You watching the particle actually changes what happens to the particle. So that totally violated the existing laws of nature at the time. They said that's impossible because if I throw this remote at the wall, it's going to hit the wall, it's going to crash there, right? But what happened in the experiment is whether you were watching it or not actually changed what would happen to it. It changed the outcome without actually touching it, right? So this totally stumped scientists, and the reason I bring this up is just like with that particle, the person's spirit and gender identity may have just gone through that other door. And we have to accept that stuff like this is possible now. That you have male chromosomes and a male brain and male genitalia. For whatever reason, this person just feels like they're a female. And now that's not to say that, that I have to ignore the reality or basically play along with their delusions and act like you don't look like a fully grown dude. But if that's how they feel, it's up to them what you can call them, okay? Everybody chooses their own name, like I said. So just wanted to touch on that and really explain that nature is not judge, jury, and executioner because there's free will involved here. We have to respect free will, or else our individual rights are all going to go down the drain. So let's not try to oppress these people because we're next to be oppressed, okay? These are not our enemies, okay? These are set up as a dialectical opposition group. But let's move on. Let's move on to the final bill. And the final bill was passed Thursday. And this bill prohibited anyone under the age of 18 from receiving gender-affirming treatments, including prescriptions that block puberty hormones or sex reassignment surgeries. It also allows the state to take temporary emergency jurisdiction over a child present in the state if the child has been subjected to or is threatened with being subjected to sex reassignment prescriptions or procedures. Now this one is the one that really set me off. And I was going to feature this topic anyway. I was preparing for it. I checked the news Friday and realized this passed. When I saw that this bill was passed, this turned into like a regular 15-20 minute This Week in Tyranny into a full-blown in-depth breakdown. So let's be clear on what this is, what I just read that this bill is. This makes it illegal for anybody under 18 to get puberty blockers or hormones. So something that was fine yesterday is now supposedly wrong. And if the government finds out that any child is undergoing, or even the parents are considering that child undergoing that kind of procedure, the government sees fit to have the right to take your child away from you and to have the child be placed into their custody. And even if you're from a different state and you're traveling to Florida, the way that law is worded, not law, it's a dictate, it's not a law. I talked about the definition of what a law is. If you're driving through Florida, technically, they could enforce that and they could charge you with a crime and they could potentially attempt to take the child from you. So, is that not tyranny? I mean, man's law is such a joke. And this is just the latest example of the holes in it. Because you could drive a car at 15, right, with a permit. You could operate machinery that could potentially kill several people, like with one split-second decision. But at 17, you can't undergo a procedure to change your own body. Not violating anybody else's rights, not endangering anybody else. So you can't do that, but you could drive a car, you could do a whole lot of stuff, right? But I understand children and teenagers are vulnerable, right? They could potentially be influenced into making a irreversible mistake that they're going to forget and potentially destroy their body, which all of us only get one of. But guess what? Children can actually do that in Florida still, without their parents' permission. And what am I talking about? Here's a quote from Florida.gov, the government website of Florida. Quote, teenagers who are served at a federally funded family planning office, such as the Florida Department of Health in Orange County, do not need their parents' permission to get birth control. End quote. What is birth control? A prescription of medication that interferes with the body's hormones and biological processes in order to achieve a different sexual biological expression. That's totally the same thing. Totally the same thing as the gender reassignment, the sex reassignment procedures that they're talking about. That's the same thing, but that's apparently okay because it's not a hot topic issue. Nobody has a problem with birth control in general. Um, and that's okay now, when essentially it's just the same thing. It's just not politicized. So they're okay with that, and nobody even puts two and two together. This isn't really about those kids. This isn't about child safety or none of that. This is a political talking point, and it's mainly a distraction talking point. And I will repeat, I personally don't think that altering puberty or hormones is a good idea. But at the same time, we alter natural hormonal processes all the time. Like children get acne, that's a natural process. And what happens? They get an ointment to clear the skin up so that they could feel better in their body and achieve a particular outcome. And if you ask transgender individuals, they will tell you all about how disgusting their body currently makes them feel, right? They would actually make that kind of comparison. But I understand that this is different because surgery is permanent, right? If we're talking about surgery. And a significant percentage of those kids may be making a mistake and may come to regret it. But you know what? Ultimately, you have to let a person make a mistake, even if it's a really serious, irreversible mistake. If your child is 12 and he's been telling you since he was 7 that he wants to get a tattoo, since he was 5, let him get the damn tattoo. That's what I would do, at least. Maybe I'm extreme in my standpoint on individual liberty by extending it to young children, but I actually would. But I get the seriousness of surgery. Like surgery, I understand. So you know what? They could have just made the surgery illegal until 18 years old. They could have done that, but they didn't. They included the hormones and puberty blockers. Why? They made it illegal until 18 years old to make a point, right? To make a pseudoscientific political point. And now the other political party got some power in Florida, and what do they do with it? Do they fight for individual rights, right? Do they take on the causal factors of what's causing social degradation? No. They push their dictates too. Just like during the pandemic, just on a different group of people, they're pushing their stuff. Bottom line, leave these people alone. Okay, I'm talking the government needs to leave these people alone and stop using them to push your tribal, nationalistic, pseudo-Christian religious agenda. Now, yes, the liberal globalist agenda has exploited transgender people and LGBTQ people in general. They created the drag queen story times and other blatant sexual displays in front of children, which are wrong objectively. Depicting things in front of children that make them feel like deeply uneased and frightened, those are violations of natural law, and it's called the theft of innocence. Okay? But that's not what this is. That's not what this is. This is just government expanding their control over the people by creating an ideological war for them to fight over. Because there's an obvious right on both sides of this issue. Controversial issues have extreme sides that are correct. They're correct over here on the far ends. On one side, it's obvious that a person should be called whatever they wish to be called. That's over here. That's obviously true. And on the other side, big grown men in dresses depicting sexual acts in front of small children, that's blatantly and obviously not acceptable. So the conservatives would be blatantly true and right on that side. So you have people that are correct, and then the two sides just struggle over the front lines, back and forth, just like war. And the war will never end. The erosion of our rights will never end, and the child abuse will never end until we understand the true root causes. I wrote down 2. There are more, but I want to simplify it. I wrote down 2. Number 1, the false belief in man's law and human authority causes both the gender confusion agenda and the discrimination of LGBT people and the suppression of their individual rights. That's all because of the false belief in man's law and human authority, which is government, religion, the money printers, so on and so forth. Number 2, people's lack of understanding of objective right and wrong and their lack of knowledge of natural law. That is the second reason. It really could have been the only reason, because it all comes from that. If people understood natural law, like I broke down these things, these issues are actually not that controversial at all. They're pretty simple until it gets into the area with children. And if the children's parents understood natural law, then a lot of these issues would get solved and we wouldn't even be in this position, okay? But ultimately it's between the parents and their children. So we need to empower the children, teach them this knowledge, and teach also their parents, and empower them and teach them. It's a one big teaching mission that we need to embark on. So I've touched on a lot of different topics. That went pretty smoothly. A few things there's a lot to expand on this, but like I said, this is a topic that's going to keep showing up. I've been really touching the concept of children, really fighting for children's rights to speak up about violence and abuse against children. That's something I'm personally becoming more and more involved in. But thank you very much to the viewers, new viewers, and thank you for the support of the existing viewers. It was a big episode for me. Here we go. Let's keep going. Thank you very much for viewing, and I'll see you next week on This Week in Tyranny.
You either vote for the mumps or the measles. Whether you vote for the lesser of two evils, you vote for evil. Politics and God are not equal, but the education to get on God is really lethal. People have more respect for a holy book than they do for a cow on a meat hook.